Hey folks, so are we as a country being intentionally disarmed and weakened by our own government? Now we all know Biden's stance and the Democrats' stance on the Second Amendment and gun ownership. They're very much anti-gun and anti-Second Amendment. Now, a lot of them will tell you they support the Second Amendment, but they also want to restrict it to ridiculous levels. So they've passed laws where things that have been legal up to this point are no longer legal. They're trying to ban things left and right. And they keep trying over and over and over and over. The gun debate, everybody's pretty much familiar with that. But in my mind, that, and on a lot of other people's minds as well, that's an attempt to disarm the U.S. citizens. But consider this. Is there an ongoing attempt currently to disarm or at least weaken the United States' ability to defend itself on a national or military level? The reason I say that is this. As you're aware, the Biden administration's been shipping billions of dollars in weapons, supplies, and funding to Ukraine. And I've talked about Ukraine a few times before. Now just set aside for a minute whether or not that's a conflict we should even be involved in. Save that for another video. That's not my point of this video. So just set that aside for the minute and consider this. We've been sending billions of dollars in equipment, supplies, and billions of dollars in funding and money to Ukraine. All right. Now, the United States is no stranger to sending aid to other countries, particularly countries that hate us. We as a rule send billions of dollars all over the world. So that's nothing new, but at a time when our economy is already under strain, we're severely in debt to the tune of probably about 30 trillion, maybe even 31 trillion now. It's been a little while since I looked at the debt clock and looked at our actual the U.S. national debt, but it's at least 30 trillion. Okay, so we're obviously being weakened financially and economically. You can see that anytime you look around you. They've printed so much money that the value of the dollar has dropped enough that everything costs more. And that's where inflation comes from. It's not, don't let the government fool you. Inflation doesn't come from corporations just charging more and more and more for their product, because corporations want to make a profit, yes, but they also want to make sure that their product is affordable enough for people to buy. And it's against the company's best interest to intentionally mark a price up so high that people can't afford to buy it, which in a lot of cases is what you're seeing now. The real cause of inflation is not the companies setting the prices, but rather the value of the currency used to purchase those products. If you take a nation's currency and double it or triple it, or in this case, what we've done over the past 2 years, which is nearly quadruple the national currency, the US dollar, the number of dollars put into circulation over the past 2 years has increased by about 400%. So that's quadrupling the number of dollars out there, which means if you quadruple the number of dollars out there, obviously every dollar is worth a quarter of what it used to be. So therefore, it's going to take 4 times as much money to buy what you used to be able to buy. Anyway, that's where the inflation is coming from. Despite what everybody would have you believe, what the government and the financial experts would tell you, or what Biden supporters or Democrats would tell you, that's the source of inflation, not corporate greed, not capitalist greed or whatever. That's the source of inflation. It's coming from all of this money that's being given out to everybody over the past 2 years. And to be fair, it didn't start under Biden. It started under Trump. Trump started spending money like crazy. But they went in, when Biden took office, everything went into overdrive. Up until before Trump became president, no president had spent more money than he had. Now, you got to be fair. You got to be completely fair about these things when you talk about this. So, yes, before he took office, no president had spent anywhere near as much as he had. But when Biden took over, again, they put the government printing press into overdrive. And they just started printing like there was no end to it, and they started giving it out. So anyway, I'm getting a little off track here, but that's where inflation comes from. And obviously, because of that and many other factors, it's clear to anybody with the willingness to actually look at things and see what's actually going on that our country is being weakened economically at a disturbing rate. So, what's the point of my video? What does this got to do with our weapons and being disarmed? Well, consider this. So far, there was an article released late last week, I should say. I think it was around Thursday, maybe even Friday, it was about Raytheon Technologies addressing their stockholders, their investors. And before I get into that, remember that the United States, along with cash and supplies, we've been sending Ukraine billions of dollars in weapons. All right, so okay, I'm not necessarily opposed to sending people weapons to defend themselves, but you have to understand what you're doing to yourself and what the bigger game is, what the bigger picture is, actually. According to one article I was reading, the United States has sent, let me look at these. I made a couple of notes here, so I want to get everything right. We've sent approximately 7,000 Javelin missiles, which is approximately 1/3 of the United States stockpile. And we've sent 1/4 of our stockpile of Stinger missiles. And that's not counting all the other weapons and material that we've sent over there. But consider that. 1/3 of our Javelin missiles and 1/4 of our Stinger missiles have been sent to Ukraine. Okay. But we're looking at possible World War III here. Is it wise to be sending away weapons that we may need ourselves just to supply somebody else. Again, setting aside for the moment whether or not we should even be in Ukraine or be helping Ukraine and being involved in that conflict. Whether we've got boots on the ground inside Ukraine, it doesn't matter. The fact that we're supplying Ukraine, we are involved. So, if we're expecting a potential World War III, does it make sense to be sending our weapons over there? But consider this too. Here's something else to think about. Raytheon, in this article, Raytheon Technologies, the CEO, I think his name is Greg Hayes, told his investors his company wouldn't be able to ramp up production to replace these weapons until next year due to parts shortages. So think about that. Here we are, we're sending a third, a quarter, who knows, maybe even up to a half now of our stockpile of shoulder-fired Javelin, shoulder-fired Stinger missiles and Javelin missiles to Ukraine at the exact same time as we are not able to actually replace those missiles in our own stockpile because we can't get the parts from China, because we need Chinese parts to make our own missiles, to make our own planes and whatever. We don't have all of the infrastructure to produce our own components, so we rely heavily on Chinese components to make our military equipment. But seeing as how we can't get any new parts to make new weapons, new missiles, it doesn't make sense to be sending the stockpile that we do have to somebody else. That leaves us, if not completely defenseless, potentially at a very weakened position should we have to get into an actual direct conflict with Russia. We have less material to fall back on to defend ourselves, to defend our own military. So that in itself is disturbing, but I have to ask, is that, back to the beginning of this video, are we intentionally being disarmed and weakened as a nation? Economically, we already are. I would submit that we are indeed being weakened intentionally as a nation economically, but are we also being disarmed intentionally? Because we have a finite supply of missiles and weaponry that can't be replaced right now because we can't get the parts to make more, yet we're sending a large portion of our stockpile overseas. That doesn't make sense to me. To me, that is a foolish decision, particularly when we're going into or facing the potential of going into a global conflict. That, combined with everything that's going on here at home with a record number of fires at food production plants, restrictions on gas production and oil drilling, the push for the United States to move away from using oil, and the push for the United States to move away from animal agriculture. All of this, it just strikes me as a coordinated attack by our own government, by our own political elite. And even to some extent our own civilian elite, such as billionaires, that it just seems like a very coordinated attack intended to weaken the United States. Now, a lot of people would say it's to help harken in the Great Reset and the digital currency, and that may be, but I'm not entirely convinced that's the only reason. You know, there's obviously people in our own government that they hate this country. I mean, you could see it in the way they talk, see it in the legislation they pass. They are very anti-American, very pro-communism, socialism, which technically is illegal under our Constitution, because we are guaranteed through our Constitution a Republican form of government. And I'm not speaking of Republican in the sense of the Republican Party, but as a form of government so yeah, to me, that we are under attack from within, a coordinated, intentional attack designed to weaken us, possibly for takeover. I mean, I hate to put it like that. I hate to go to that point, because I don't like to think that there's the possibility that we could ever be invaded. And to be fair, given a legitimate government that puts our own country first, it would be very, very difficult for any country to invade us. There's only two avenues of access. That would be through Canada and through Mexico, because any advance across either the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean would be very quickly noticed, weeks if not months ahead of time, giving us plenty of notice to prepare for it. Whereas if it was done over land, it would be a little bit easier to sneak troops in, either through Canada or through Mexico. Anyway, but this does bring up the question of, are we being set up and weakened for a potential invasion? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case, but I think it's clear, at least to me, and I think it's safe to say that this country is definitely under attack from within. We are being weakened, both economically and, yeah, I would say, at least it's my position, that we are being weakened militarily. We're being disarmed to an extent. By our own government. The logic behind that, I don't understand, and I'm very concerned. Anyway, that's all I've got for right now. Just tossing that out there. Let me know what you guys think. I'm fixing to get out here and water my garden, because when I start thinking about things like that, I have no control over what the government does, and I have no control over whether or not we're invaded by another country. And thinking about those things kind of stresses me out. What does make me feel better is getting out and doing something that I do have control over. And right now, that's going out here to my garden and watering my plants, and I get some comfort, some sense of security from knowing I've got food growing out here. So, with that, that's all I've got. I'm going to get out here and water this garden, make sure my plants are growing really good. And then I'll go in and I'll start dinner. So it's just something to think about, stay aware of. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, share, subscribe if you haven't. Stay safe. Take care of each other. Watch out for your families. Stay busy. Get ready for what's happening, because in this mad world we're in, you never know what's going to be coming next. So with that, until next time, folks, take care. I'll catch you later.